The announcement hit like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the political world and leaving Americans stunned. Newsrooms scrambled to verify the details, while social media exploded with speculation and disbelief. In November 2025, after a string of unexpected Republican losses in key battleground states, President Trump unveiled a bold and unprecedented plan: a $2,000 tariff dividend for every American family. The announcement came at a time when the party was reeling, and Trump needed to regain momentum. He took to Truth Social, his favorite platform, to make the promise directly to his base. Trump declared that every family would receive a $2,000 check, funded entirely by tariffs imposed on foreign goods. Money, he claimed, that would come straight from America's trading partners. Trump framed the dividend as a reward for loyalty and proof that his aggressive trade war was finally paying off for ordinary Americans. He painted himself as the only leader willing to fight for the people's prosperity. But the details were murky. Who exactly would qualify for the payment? Would children be included? Was it a one-time check or a recurring benefit? Reporters pressed for answers, but the administration offered little clarity. No answers came, just a headline-grabbing promise that dominated the news cycle and left families wondering if relief was really on the way. The timing was no accident. The announcement landed just before the holidays, when families across the country were feeling the pinch of rising prices and looking for any financial relief they could get. At rallies, Trump supporters seized on the promise, turning the $2,000 dividend into a populist rallying cry. The idea of tariffs as a golden goose for the people electrified his base and dominated campaign events. But behind the scenes, the very tariffs meant to fund this ambitious plan were facing a major challenge in the Supreme Court. Legal experts questioned whether the president even had the authority to redirect tariff revenue in this way. The $2,000 dividend was a high-stakes gamble, launched as legal walls closed in and political pressure mounted. Trump was betting everything on a promise that might never materialize. Trump projected unwavering confidence in public, but behind the scenes, his authority and the future of his promise was under serious threat. To grasp the crisis, you have to understand Trump's tariff fortress. Since returning to office, he used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose sweeping tariffs, bypassing Congress. Tariff revenue soared to $195 billion, a 153% jump in 1 year. Supporters saw this as proof of success. Critics called it a hidden tax on Americans, fueling inflation. The core debate: do tariffs hurt foreign exporters or American consumers? Trump's base believed he'd made other countries pay. But the policy's legal foundation was shaky. Its survival was crucial, not just for the dividend but for Trump's entire economic agenda. The Supreme Court challenge, Learning Resources versus Trump, threatened to topple Trump's tariff regime, sending shockwaves through Washington. The case quickly became a national spectacle, drawing intense media attention and sparking heated debates about the limits of presidential authority. Legal experts, politicians, and citizens alike watched closely, aware that the outcome could reshape the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches for years to come. Plaintiffs argued the president had overstepped, using emergency powers for massive economic policy without Congress. They contended that such sweeping actions, which affected millions of Americans and global markets, required explicit legislative approval. Their legal team emphasized that the Constitution grants Congress, not the president, the power to regulate trade and tariffs, warning that unchecked executive action could set a dangerous precedent. The justices zeroed in on the major questions doctrine. Big moves need clear congressional approval. This doctrine, increasingly cited in recent years, holds that when an issue has vast economic or political significance, the president cannot act alone. The court's questions reflected deep concern about maintaining the separation of powers at the heart of American democracy. Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Sotomayor drew parallels to past cases, questioning unchecked executive power. They referenced historic rulings where the court had reined in presidents who tried to bypass Congress, highlighting the judiciary's role as a crucial check on the executive branch. Even conservative justices were wary. If Trump could do this, what could stop future presidents from using emergency powers for anything? Their skepticism crossed ideological lines, revealing a rare moment of unity in defense of constitutional boundaries. The administration's lawyer argued Congress had granted broad authority, but the court was unconvinced. The justices pressed for specifics, challenging the idea that vague statutes could justify such far-reaching executive action. The justices pressed, "What are the limits to presidential power here?" They demanded clarity, seeking to define the boundaries that would prevent future abuses, and their pointed questions signaled the gravity of the moment. The hearing revealed bipartisan skepticism of executive overreach. Lawmakers from both parties voiced concern, recognizing that today's unchecked power could be tomorrow's threat, regardless of who sits in the Oval Office. The legal foundation of Trump's tariffs was cracking. As the arguments unfolded, it became clear that the administration's justification was on shaky ground, and the stakes for presidential power had never been higher. The fate of his economic strategy hung in the balance, with the entire nation awaiting the court's decision, a ruling that could redefine the limits of executive authority for generations to come. Trump's messaging and legal defense were at odds. Publicly, he boasted tariffs were filling America's coffers and funding the $2,000 dividend. In court, his lawyers insisted tariffs weren't taxes, just regulatory tools, not meant to raise revenue. This contradiction was glaring. Trump promised to give away billions, while his legal team downplayed the money's importance. The justices noticed, undermining the administration's credibility. The administration was trapped, celebrating revenue in public, dismissing it in court. Trump's rhetoric, effective on the campaign trail, became a liability in the courtroom. The core weakness was exposed, a fiscal policy disguised as regulation, fooling no one. The Supreme Court saw through the charade. Even if Trump cleared legal hurdles, the math behind the $2,000 dividend didn't add up. Tariff revenue hit $195 billion, but the dividend would cost over $600 billion a year. The shortfall was massive. Hundreds of billions would need to be borrowed. Even limiting payments to lower-income adults left a huge gap. Economists called it a fantasy. The numbers simply didn't work. Treasury Secretary Besson distanced himself, suggesting the plan wasn't vetted by his department. The administration's own officials poured cold water on the idea. The dividend was a political slogan, not a real policy. The money just wasn't there. As the Supreme Court's decision loomed, chaos threatened. If Trump's tariff authority was struck down, the $195 billion collected wouldn't go to families. It'd be refunded to importers. Justice Barrett warned of bureaucratic chaos, repaying thousands of companies for millions of transactions. The irony, a policy meant to reward Americans would end with payouts to corporations. Without court approval, Trump couldn't deliver the dividend by executive order. Congress would have to act, which was unlikely. The collapse of his tariff authority would kill his signature promise and upend his trade policy. Businesses would face sudden uncertainty, and the economy would be thrown into turmoil. The chaos would ripple far beyond Washington. Trump's economic strategy was on the brink. The Supreme Court's decision was a reckoning for Trump, a moment that forced the country to confront the gap between campaign promises and the realities of governance. The ruling sent shockwaves through Washington, echoing far beyond the marble steps of the court. His supporters, and indeed the entire nation, watched anxiously as the news broke, realizing that the outcome would shape not just their wallets, but their faith in the political process. For Trump, a defeat would shatter his carefully crafted image as a master dealmaker, a leader who could bend the system to his will and deliver on bold promises. Instead, it would expose the so-called dividend as an empty gesture, a promise that couldn't withstand legal or economic scrutiny. Supporters, many of whom had counted on a $2,000 check to ease their financial burdens, were left feeling betrayed and let down by a system they believed was finally working for them. Their disappointment quickly turned to anger, fueling frustration not just with Trump, but with the entire political establishment. The likely outcome, refunds to corporations, no dividend for families, seemed to confirm the fears of those who felt the system was rigged against ordinary people. And as the narrative of judicial overreach took hold, debates erupted over the proper limits of the courts and the president. The episode revealed the limits of presidential power, showing that even the most forceful rhetoric can't override the checks and balances built into American democracy. It also exposed the hard truths of economics. Money doesn't appear by decree, and policies must be grounded in fiscal reality. Populist promises, no matter how appealing, can't override the Constitution or basic math. The law and the ledger both have the final say. The clash between Trump's rhetoric and reality became a national lesson, highlighting the tension between political ambition and practical governance. It also exposed deep divisions in America's economic understanding, as citizens debated who truly benefits from government action and who is left behind. The fallout would spark a nationwide debate about protectionism, executive authority, and the promises politicians make on the campaign trail. The tariff dividend saga stands as a cautionary tale for future elections, reminding voters and leaders alike that easy answers rarely survive contact with reality. In the end, reality always gets the last word, no matter how loud the promises or how high the hopes.